that I'd love you to rest with or sit with, or one last feeling that I'd love you to rest with, is simply this. Take time out to pause. Quite often, when we're feeling our purpose, it gets urgent. There's an urgency, there's a passion that comes in each and every one of us, and we want to find that purpose as soon as possible. So don't forget to pause, to stop, to rest. Because when you pause and when you say, okay, I've done all I can today, maybe I'll just stop and let all the incredible beings, masters, guides that you have that are always supporting you, give them some space to share purpose with you. Because they have actually walked this path before. The path of the great goddesses, the path of the great masters, the path of the dakinis, the tantrikas, the path of the unknown. They've walked it before you. So they have really good advice when you're willing to listen. So I would simply say our world needs time to pause. I think with, modern social media, AI, with all the new technologies, people are so busy. We just need to take time out to listen, to be still, to find space, and to be that presence. Because that presence that you're feeling now, that is the presence of purpose. And purpose can't find you if you don't give it space.
Hi, my name is Zenka Caro. I'm founder of LightNet, and my passion and purpose is to make the impossible possible. I am here for the 99th episode with a very special person, Altair. He is very close to my heart, and his brain is studied all over the world. He has mastered his consciousness, his maturity, and his level of leadership and contribution over the course of his entire life, from almost the day he was born, which you'll find out more about in this interview. He and his partner, Raquel Spring, have started a company called Boundless Quantum Technologies. And it's a consciousness institute that is really looking at human evolution and applying what we understand about consciousness so that we can lead with that in the future. He is going to do a very, very special interview with us where he pauses to do activations and meditations that help you understand how to broadcast with your brainwaves, with your heart, into the field as you search for and propagate and grab on to your purpose. As I mentioned, this is episode 99. We just have one more episode, number 100, with Lynn Twist next week. Then we'll be heading off to Portugal soon, and we'll be also entering this next phase of episode 100 to episode 200. And in this, we are inviting collaboration. So the next episodes will be done by 33 collaborators who will each be interviewing three people that are on fire, burning in their life with purpose and passion, and bringing us into the best world that we can possibly create. It is my deepest pleasure to introduce Altair today.
When I was just 2 years old, I discovered my purpose to be the connection with consciousness itself, higher consciousness, and how to connect in a completely coherent way all of humanity. And the reason why was I had a recurring dream when I was 2 years old until when I was 3 that I was a Tibetan monk. I got a bright flash of light just at that moment. Every single night of that 2-year-old's life until when I was 3, that I was a Tibetan monk and that I had access to the primordial light and sound. And I remembered it I died every single night. Now, I can tell you it's not pleasant dying every single night when you're just a young fellow, and you don't if you hear lots of shaking going on, that's our little dog who's really part of this and loves being part of this whole action here. I think he wants to be filmed as well. So in those very early years, I discovered that what I really wanted to understand was consciousness. How was it possible for a 2-year-old boy to have the experience of an adult Tibetan monk and the memories and the experience of primordial light and sound, and falling into that primordial light and sound as I died? I woke up every night. I can't say it was a pleasant experience. I woke up every single night feeling the dread of going out of body, which is part of also my exploration into consciousness itself. So going out of body and then actually exploring what lay beyond the body, which was that primordial light and sound. In other words, dropping into the void at such an early age. Now, my parents thought I had epilepsy because I was waking up every single night screaming. And so they sent me to every specialist they could find. I did brain tests, eye tests, heart tests, lung tests, blood tests, lymphatic tests, you name it. I was actually prodded and poked, which kind of left some trauma as a little kid, because not only was I dying every night, but I was also poked and prodded by a lot of the medical fraternity and sorority of the time. And they declared there was absolutely nothing wrong with me. So it was the earliest question I had was, how is it possible for a little wee kid to experience this? I experienced it every night, 365 days in a row, nights in a row. And at the end of it, a doctor said, look, maybe he's hot, take all his clothes off, which they did. And that was how the dream stopped. But that memory of this connection of consciousness right across time and space, that there was a link that I was making, according to the Dalai Lama, that I was making with a death as a Tibetan monk in 1959 at Samye Monastery, because I've spoken at length to the Dalai Lama about this and about my dreams and about lucid dreaming and about how much of an impact dreams can have on our life. So my purpose was ignited, you could say, fired up by that initial experience, which led me to believe that our consciousness is a continuum, that it exists. So a number of things. One, that there is a consciousness that is presentient. So the consciousness can actually determine both experiences in the past and experiences in the future, and that they are linked. So that is one of the first, you could say, my purposes to explore, was to understand what is presentience for the human being. We all have access to it. Those of you that are watching this and may feel, oh yeah, I know when the phone rings it's my mom, or I had this inkling that something was going to happen in some part of the world and then it happened, you'll know exactly what I mean. You all have presentience. So one was that, how is it possible for a little boy to actually gain direct access to a continuum of experience? So that's the first one. So my purpose was to discover and uncover and explore with people such as you, such as everybody watching here, the nature of consciousness and how it can access that presentience, that complete continuum of past, present and future, where there is no past and present and future. So that was one part of my purpose. Second part of my purpose was to understand what non-local consciousness really is. So if there is a consciousness that exists, that is infinite, and that we all have access to, and that I seemingly had access to through this primordial light and sound experience, how do we access that? Is there a way that we can research that? And I know, for example, you and many other wonderful people in the Hollow Movement or the Purpose Labs are exploring the nature of consciousness, and what would it mean if we all understood on this planet that there really was non-local consciousness and that we could access that. Would that change, for example, our perception of life and death? Because the biggest fear of a human being is naturally death. They fear that cessation of the body's functions. And yet, what if we really deeply knew, if it was part of our purpose, to understand that non-local consciousness? So there was a second part of my purpose that arose out of this very young experience at the age of 2 and 3. And people have often said to me, how is it possible for a young boy to remember that? Well, I can assure you, if you wake up from a nightmare every single night and it becomes so embodied that it's actually a living part of your experience and it's more powerful than your daily normal life experience, I can tell you it has a really significant impact. So the second part of that purpose was to understand non-local consciousness. The third part, and I think you'll find it quite natural that I'll mention these two, is to understand out-of-body experience and near-death experience. When I was born with the cord wrapped around my neck. I had a near-death experience at birth, and I suspect that that is the reason why at 2 I was able to recall with such detail this experience of a Tibetan monk. In the dream, I was a Tibetan monk walking with a companion across a road or a bridge or an access point to a monastery. I can remember it as clear as if it's living here in me now. And as I walked across to that monastery, there was an enormous explosion and there was a great pain, and I fell. And I obviously fell down or fell out of body or whatever was happening at the time. And when I spoke to the Dalai Lama about this, there was, in 1959, the exact experience. I could describe it in detail. I could describe stupas and paintings and all sorts of other things. It connects to an experience my mum had when she was just 15 years old. She was in an orchard in Nelson, and she'd been sent there to protect her and the family from World War II and all the problems that could possibly have come to New Zealand. So she was there in the middle of her very early morning of sitting on a bench in the middle of an orchard in Nelson, New Zealand. A tohunga, a Maori elder, a woman, came up to her, took her hand and said, "I'd like to tell you about your future." So here's the presentient part, and said to my mum, looked at my mum's hand and said, "You're going to have 4 children, correct?" And remember, my mum was just 15 with no thoughts of having any children. She said, "You're going to have 4 children, correct?" She said, "You'll have 2 boys and then 2 girls, also correct." She said, "Your eldest son will or was a monk, and so he will have," and she started to tell my mum about because I'm the eldest son, about my past life. My mum said she got so scared. Yeah, if you're getting goosebumps, I am too. If you're getting goosebumps listening to this, you'll know that for my mum, this was like, it didn't match with any of her experience. And she screamed, she said, and she ran off, and she didn't know what the woman was going to say, what this tohunga was going to say after that. And she never told me about the past life as a monk. She didn't say Tibetan monk, that came through in my dream, but my past life as a monk. Mum said she was scared of telling me when I was very young, when I had those dreams, because she thought I'd probably just run away to a monastery. And in fact, she was right. I did do that. I went and studied at many monasteries from my mid-20s, from my early 20s. So I've studied in monasteries in Japan. My first monasteries I studied at were Zen monasteries in Japan, then Shingon monasteries, and then Thai monasteries and Tibetan monasteries, and so on and so forth. I studied at many of them with just very joyful experiences. So for my mum, this was a terrifying realization or proclamation, really from source, delivered to her through the beautiful voice of an elder, Maori tohunga, when she was just 15. So she only told me about this past life as a monk and about that particular experience just before she passed. So my mum lived to a very tender and very sprightly age of 90, and she was looking after Cambodian refugees. That was her she received the Queen's Medal for her work with Cambodian refugees over many, many years, and I helped her from those very early days. So I had a lot of experience, I guess, with charitable work, and it's certainly something I've continued to this day. So that's the out-of-body and near-death experience. The near-death experience, as I was saying, I do believe that is what enabled me at the age of 2, spontaneously, to suddenly have this recall of this past life, which was so embodied and obviously still within me. And so many of you listening, if you have had a past life, you'll know what I mean when I say it's embodied. You know it. Nobody has to give you confirmation of it. You might get that through psychics, channels, and so on, but you don't need any confirmation other than what your body tells you. And if you've had an out-of-body experience, which I've had many times, and people have often asked me, can you do this at will? Yes, I can. I've done that, in fact, to retrieve information. I've gone out of body in a group and retrieved information from other people's past lives by going into their memories or into their soul memories. It's quite a difficult task, actually, for me, because when I do it, I literally go out of body. My body is fundamentally lifeless. And when I come into it, I'm shaking like a fig leaf because it feels like ice, because I've literally gone completely out of body, gone to retrieve soul information and come back. So, of course, being able to do that from a very young age meant I was very intrigued by, is there any research done on near-death experience or out-of-body experience? And so part of my purpose, first, to understand the power of presentience, second, to understand non-local consciousness, and this third, to understand out-of-body and near-death experience, became primary to my understanding of consciousness itself. And the fourth one was non-local perception itself, which of course leads me right into ETs. And all of you that are listening that have had a connection with ETs or are ETs or have that historical reference point, again embodied, you'll know what I mean when I say non-local perception is a reality for people that understand the nature of consciousness. Now, remote viewing is one part of it that gained a lot of media because of CIA, because of all this work done where they use people to locate, seemingly unlocatable objects, planes, spy outfits. There was all of this kind of thing. But the actual reality of remote viewing is it's very real and it is very understandable once you start to research consciousness. So I'll give you an example of how I've worked with remote viewing, because people have asked me to remote view in the past, and it's comparatively simple because, again, it's an embodied experience. The key is embodiment. The new, humanity is really being able to embody consciousness and these, what I've divided into these 4 purposes of mine: presentience, non-local consciousness, OBEs and NDEs, and non-local perception. So if you're listening and you want a tip of how to remote view, I would suggest you do something like this. Get a friend who agrees with you to take photos or take information that you couldn't possibly know. Then get a piece of paper and pen or crayons or whatever it is that really turns you on. You want something, and I literally mean turn you on. You want your body, that Shakti, that prajna in your body, to literally awake, that prana, that power. And what I found with remote viewing is that people would ask me, so I did these experiments with all these different people where they'd say, okay, I've got a place, it's a place I've been to, it's with friends. I said, dear, don't describe it. So I said, and I'd start to draw, and exactly like you felt goosebumps as you're watching, or I felt goosebumps as I'm relating this, as I start to draw, it'll just be clear. I started to draw, I'll give you an example. So the person that was doing the remote viewing with me, she was in a particular place. I didn't know where she was. She went there. She started to relate to me, okay, I'm in a particular place and it's one of my, favorite places to go. I had no idea where she was. I had no reference point. And I said, don't tell me anymore. And I started to draw. And at first I drew a body of water. And I thought, that doesn't quite feel right. But then I started, so you put that aside. You just keep allowing whatever is your natural creative way to express this non-local perception to arise within you. For me, it's like drawing with goosebumps. That's the simple way of putting it. So I just started to draw a lake, and then I suddenly realized, oh, it's actually not just a lake. It's actually a big lake, and it's got some trees. For some reason, as I was drawing, I can even feel it now. I've got little goosebumps coming up because I can remember it. And I remember these trees, and it was a particular format. One was smaller, there was a larger middle one, and then a very small one. And then I realized, oh, I'm actually looking down through those trees, and there's an object, there's an animal that's there. So I started to draw the animal, and then I started to realize, oh, this is a large lake, and it's got a particular configuration of pine trees exactly like that, and there was a bear or something. And so I started to describe it. And of course, the person nearly shrieked and leaped out of the tree. She said, how can you possibly do it? She said, I'm looking out my window. There is a lake, it's Lake Louise, and there is one pine tree, and then another taller one, and then a really short one. And she said, there's an animal down eating the scraps out of it. She said, how can you possibly? I said, and you can feel it, right? It's all the goosebumps. So I did the same with random numbers. Like I used to take kids to a museum and just play that. They'd try and guess the random numbers, and then I'd guess like 3 in a row. They say, how do you do that? And I'd say, it's the same thing. I just wait. You wait till your body actually gives you that message. Now, so non-local perception is totally that. We are literally the body of the universe. We are literally like neurons in the whole universe. All of us are like parts of a universal mind and heart. So my purpose in this fourth part was to understand how non-local perception really worked, because when I was just 4 years old, so after those dreams of being a Tibetan monk and dying every night, when I was then 4 years old, I just said out of the blue to my mother, please can you find me a Zen teacher and a Japanese tea ceremony teacher? And she said, what for? I said, I don't know. I just know I've got to learn it. So as I started to learn at the age of 4, the Zen of the traditional nature of Japanese Zen, I found a woman, or my mum found a woman called Keiko, who was just this beautiful soul. She was a true, I'll get little tears if when there's somebody really special that you've had in your life that just comes in for a short amount of time. So she actually showed me what true Zen was, which is just simple presence through the art of tea ceremony. So she taught me tea ceremony when I was this little kid. So I've had this deep affinity with tea and with food, and especially with Japanese calligraphy, art, even the past connection with periods like the Heian period in Japan. I know I've been in that time and written poetry and written in, sung in Japanese. There's all of that. So there was this really natural affinity with suddenly, spontaneously wanting to learn Japanese tea ceremony. And then at the age of 5, I said to my parents, I'm not from here. So for all of you who relate to ETs, I said, I'm not from here. I need to go home. And they said, what do you mean? I said, I'm going to write to NASA, because I said, I'm sure they'll have a solution. I wrote a letter to NASA saying, dear NASA scientists, I'm not from Earth. I'm from a star system out beyond Alpha Centauri. I'd like to catch the first one-way flight home. Could you arrange it for me? And I've still got the letters. They wrote back to me and they said, look, we don't want to disappoint you, but we don't have any one-way flights. We also can't fly that far at the moment. We're still sort of hovering trying to get to in the regions of the Moon and Mars. So they said, but when you turn 18, we'd be delighted to have you as an astronaut, and you could do your training, and then maybe, who knows what stage we'll be at then. So I knew at the age of 5 that I wasn't from here. I knew I had Sirius, Pleiades, and Arcturus energies flowing through me. And those of you who know that you're not from here, or you have access to that consciousness, which is called non-local or is non-local perception, you'll recognize what I'm talking about. You'll feel it in your body. You'll say, oh, I know, I've had that feeling since a young person, or I've had that feeling growing up, or I went to a course, or I went to one of the purpose labs, and I suddenly realized my purpose is to embrace a consciousness that's far beyond what we call just Earth. So that non-local perception becomes very, very important to help you access information from other planets, other star systems, other galaxies and other dimensions. And once you start to feel into that, you start to feel into the incredible power that consciousness holds. So I'm probably sharing a lot just from one simple question, but I relate in this way. I've got a beautiful 11-year-old daughter named Maya, and she was named after the Maya of the Pleiades. And she always asks me, and she says, Dad, can you explain to me how all this consciousness works? And I said, okay, the way I look at it is this. I said, can you think of a simple point, that is, and she says yes. And I said, so what comes before the point? She said, well, probably nothing. Oh, well, I got lots of bright flashes around you. So obviously you're a mother of the void. I think everybody listening to this knows what I mean when you say mother of the void. So from the beginning, there's a void, right? And then there's a dot. There's a point that comes in that void. And from that point comes a line. So you're starting to understand dimensions. This is the way I explain it to an 11-year-old. And I'd say, so can you think of nothing? Yes. Can you think of the point? Yes. Can you think of a line that comes from a point? Yes. So up till now, an 11-year-old can appreciate that. And then I said, can you also understand a line that's extended in a flat plane? And they go, well, yeah, I can, because obviously we're sitting here on a floor, or we're in a room where most people can understand, okay, we've gone from one dimension to 2 dimensions to 3 dimensions. So I'm thinking of a plane, and then I can also extend that plane up to make a cube. Can you do that? So I'll get the child to extend it out so she can understand, oh, yeah. And she'll probably say, I'd rather make a sphere. So here we are in 3 dimensions in whatever shape you want to make. Now, to extend beyond that, I asked my daughter to move the object through space, through time and space. So now you're starting to move into 4 dimensions. So she moves it like this, and again I'm getting goosebumps because I can actually feel the 4th dimension opening up for all of you that are watching and listening. You're starting to feel what I mean, because you're moving your own sphere or cube through unbounded space, right? Now, when you come to the 5th dimension, imagine that you take that opportunity, so this is how I explain it to an 11-year-old, and you take that object, but now you create multiple paths. So suddenly, instead of the one path you've been moving, now there's multiple paths. You're actually extending that object. You're allowing it to travel simultaneously in many, many directions, right? Now you've got the 5th dimension. So you've got many endings if you got. And for an 11-year-old, she can go, oh, yeah, I get that. Wow, my cube or my sphere can go in multiple directions all at once. In fact, if I have many spheres, they'll all move, but it's actually the opportunity or the possibility that one sphere can travel simultaneously in many directions. I say, great, have you got that? Now, what if you look at the beginnings? What if that sphere that seemingly began at one point, because whenever you created it or thought about it, what if it had multiple beginnings? So into the 6th dimension, what if instead of not only having multiple endings, but it has multiple beginnings? And she'd go, oh, yeah, I can get that. All right, I've got lots of different starting points for that sphere, and it's got many, many ending points. So now you're opening to the 6th dimension. Then I'd say to her, okay, what now if instead of, at the moment, if you drop your sphere or your cube on the ground, it might break or it might fall to the ground, but what if every single one of those beginnings and those endings has completely different rules? what if they are not bound by the same rules as all the other spheres? So I said, what would that be like? And she'd say, oh, well, some of my spheres can fly without me doing it. And some of them are so heavy that they kind of keep going down. And some of them are invisible. And so, yeah, exactly. I said, so there's lots of different rules. And now you're starting to move into the seventh dimension because you're starting to understand that there are multiple rules that operate, and they don't have to operate by the same rules as our universe, as our physical universe, because they're going to do different things. She said, oh, yeah, I get that. And I said, now, what about if you want to move to another dimension beside that? What if every single one of those spheres that have multiple endings and multiple beginnings and multiple rules, almost as if they're in their own universe, what about if they can think for themselves? And then she got goosebumps. She said, oh, she said, I think that's making my brain switch. Yeah, I said, exactly. I said, now you're starting to realize that consciousness is that vast. Because not only can consciousness think, but then what if you go the next step and say, not only does it have all those thought forms that actually operate, but what about if it feels? And then what about if there is such a presence to all of those that it actually knows its source? So then you keep extrapolate, you keep building that beautiful opportunity. And then my daughter will say, oh, actually, I think my brain's a bit tired now, Dad. I think we need to stop at this point. And then I always ask her, do you think you could draw that? She said, yeah, I can kind of draw each. Because once we start to embody those feelings that consciousness is, then we start to realize we and our reality and our purpose can be whatever we want. We literally are infinite, just like that simple sequence that I described. So it is absolutely heart-blowing and mind-blowing when you realize your purpose and my purpose is actually to be infinite, to be absolutely purpose-driven for the highest, most beautiful opportunity you could ever imagine a soul to have. What about if you were born knowing that anything that you thought was possible or anything you felt was real? What about if at school or whatever education hub you're part of, what about if they really told you to believe in the infinite purpose of every single being? That we are literally those sparks of God's presence or the light of the universe. What about if they told you that right from the very beginning? If you'd been told that when you were like my age, 2 or 3 and going through this, what would that change for you? Would you be in a completely different reality than you are now? I dare say you would be. Because in fact, you'd start to realize that consciousness itself is limitless. And that consciousness is unbound. It has a way of touching every single possible dream that you've ever had in your life and creating it. And that, I know, is what the Hollow Purpose, the movement, the Purpose Labs, everything that we, and I'm including everybody here, as well as you, Zenka, as well as everybody that's gathered here listening to this, that is what we're here for. I always have described my purpose from, what I've said, from those 4 basic pillars of consciousness as presentience, consciousness as non-local consciousness, consciousness as out-of-body and near-death experience, and consciousness as non-local perception. I've always described it in a triangular form, and that is that consciousness is one of those triangle pieces, one simple piece. The second piece is actually human coherence, that once we understand that consciousness is limitless and that we have the most incredible opportunity to manifest anything that we want on this planet, then we want to find, like us, or like Raquel, or like anybody that we have a deep, heartfelt experience with, we want to find those people that are naturally operating at our frequency and vibration, because it's much easier to find coherence. And coherence, once you understand the limitlessness of consciousness, you realize I want to vibrate in exactly the same beautiful containers as everybody who feels the same vibration frequency as me. So consciousness with coherence adds a whole new vibration to this planet. For example, many of those tests and research that has been done, when everybody meditates in a city, the violence in the city actually goes down. And those are very verifiable research data that has been tested again and again. So we don't need that to prove anything beyond the fact that coherence is real. Equally, flip the opposite one. When there is war and there's strife and there's chaos, coherence seems to just be dashed. And everybody starts to fall into anxiety and fear, and they wonder, if the kingdom literally is going to come, and they feel disempowered. Now, our leadership needs to work on consciousness and coherence, first and foremost. All our leaders should be in coherence. Surely that's what leadership is, on a very deep human level. So the first point is that power of consciousness. The second point is the power of human coherence. And then the third point, which I think everybody will relate to, is resources. And by this I mean capital and this physical support on this planet of very, very deep research into consciousness and coherence. If we can bring the capital of this planet together and not spend it on bombing other countries and firing missiles at each other, but actually spend it on consciousness and coherence, we would actually start to embark on a whole new planetary civilization. Because right at the center of my triangle of consciousness and coherence and capital, if we use the 3 C's, is love. Because ultimately, human consciousness is love. It is nothing else. When it's separate and feels in separation and feels like it is lost, clearly it's not in love. And when it is in fear, it's not in love. But when there is a letting go of fear and a letting go of the fear, our basic fear, which was my one when I was 2, of death, when we let go of the fear of death and we let go of the fear of separation, what arises is love. This beautiful opportunity to love each other, to love you, to love everybody that's listening to this, to love your neighbor, to love your friend, to love... Look, if that was the only thing that we were educated in, then our world as a civilization would arise, and all the ETs, all the extra dimensionals, all the beings that right now are actually already with us and are waiting for us to come into coherence, to recognize the limitlessness of consciousness. They would simply, they'd already be here. Those of you that already know what I'm speaking about know that because they've appeared to you, they've spoken to you, you're channeling them, you're able to touch them, you've spoken to them, they come in your dreams, they come in your waking moments, because they're not separate from you. We're them. Many of you are actually ancient beings from Sirius, for example. Many of you have strong connections to, say, the ancient Egyptian or ancient Mesopotamian and Sumerian lineages will know that that heritage, that lineage that you have felt so close to is also speaking to the power of the beings and astronomers at the time that knew that Sirius was a really important part of the connection with Earth, because when Sirius appears, the Nile would flood and there would be a really deep awareness of water alchemy and the power of water. Water and oceans, as far as consciousness occurs, because I've done a lot of research with water throughout my life. I was the assistant, let's call the educational advisor for Dr. Masaru Emoto, the water molecule guy. And I've worked with so many famous scientists in my life because they recognize that the water on Gaia, the water on Earth, is actually a telepathic quality that allows Gaia, or Earth herself, to communicate to other beings who have that same water consciousness. Water, the waters of life, as has been spoken in many religions, The waters of life has a really deep esoteric meaning. It is a telepathic transport and channel for wisdom. If you think Gaia, our earth, is just sitting there not growing wiser through all the crazy things that humanity has done, then think again, because she naturally is communicating to other civilizations, other star beings, other star worlds, letting them know what exactly is happening here in the same way as we do. We have a natural ability for telepathy, telekinesis, teleportation, I know that you have done the same thing. You're able to import things. So am I. So I've done that in the past. I remember I prayed in front of a statue of Kuan Yin some years ago in front of friends, and a rare deep sea ocean pearl manifested out of the heart of that statue, dropped into my hands. I used it for many years for healing, and then when my mum was about to pass, I left it with her and it vanished. And the curious thing was, when I prayed in front of that statue, not one but two rare deep sea ocean pearls manifested out of that statue. The day that my pearl vanished, I rang the person, a woman, a friend of mine, who had the second one, and she said, I was about to contact you because at this such and such time, at exactly the same time as my mum's pearl disappeared, hers did as well. So the power of manifestation, the power of our ability to be able to touch our purpose through synchronicities like that, synchronicities and signs. The power of synchronicities and signs, I really want to say to everybody listening, keep a diary of those. Actually keep a diary of your dreams, of the synchronicities in your life, of the signs, because they are actually literally alchemy. They are literally magic that you can work with to help manifestation, to help purpose. Some years ago, I ran with a wonderful soul a course called Cosmic Cash, and I did a manifestation process with that group where I showed them how cash literally can manifest at any time. And one of the people on that course, I still remember him, he and his girlfriend said, look, we want to let you know we're grateful that you let us into the course for free because we don't have a bean in the world and nothing is going to come to us. We don't have jobs. We've got nobody owing us anything. I said, okay, sure. You believe that if you want, but this is what I want you to do. So I got him, and everybody can do this watching this. Go and speak to your future self. Go and spend a few moments every day before you go to sleep at night, before you get up in the morning. Actually just sit down, turn into your future self and say, I need to manifest this or this part. And you need to feel it. You feel it, you see it, you hear it, you smell it. You let all your senses go crazy with feeling that. So I said to him, why don't you just manifest? What do you need to manifest? And he said, gosh, he said, I'd even just love a few $100 extra. I said, okay, just do that over the next 2 days. But whatever you do, don't hold on to it. Just do the practice, then let go. Think of nothing. Anyway, you can imagine, within 24 hours, he rang me, he sent this video and he called the group and all. He said, you'll never believe what happened. He said, I had forgotten. He said, just prior to COVID, I booked a flight. And he said the flight was about $400. And he said, I had completely forgotten that I couldn't take it because of COVID, because everything shut down. So I wrote a letter to the airlines and said, can I get a refund? They said, oh no, it's COVID, we're trying to do, but we'll get in touch. Would you believe that exact weekend, the airlines got in touch and refunded his money? And this is years later. This was like 3 years after COVID, 3 years after the beginning of COVID. So it was just one of those fabulous moments where you realize the infinite potential of the human being is actually real. If you want to focus on your reality and say, no, that doesn't happen, well, of course, the very no, that doesn't happen is what you're creating. Once you start to realize that, in Japanese, there's a word called kotodama. And kotodama means the power, the magic of the power of words. Every single word you utter has an alchemical or magical power. So if you're going to say something to yourself like, I don't believe this, or this is nonsense, or try and switch everything to what you do want to believe or you do want to have happen in your life. and everything will shift. Because it's your consciousness. Your consciousness is limitless. It has the power to touch anything and everything that you've ever dreamed of. So that part is really, really crucial. The other thing I was going to mention is I had the beauty of doing another fantastic course some years later called Contact, and that was with Zenka Caro. And that for me, when we started to have people recognizing that they were ETs or connecting with orbs or having craft manifest in their area, in their region, it was just amazing. So I do want to thank you for that purpose, because I've had a lot of connections with craft, with extraterrestrials, with extra dimensionals. That was very natural for me. But the key, as I said, once you recognize that consciousness, you want to be able to create coherence. You want to create a coherence of love. So if your passion is ETs, then create a group. Look after this planet by bringing that coherence, bringing those groups together. If you're short of funds, then get together with people who are going to help you to fund something that you've got a fantastic idea for, because they are out there. You've just got to reach out. Like, let people know your vision, your purpose. Speak it daily. Write it down. I always used to say to people, write down your purpose 10 times every single day, night and morning, and then put it on your fridge or on your bed or wherever it happens to be. Sleep with it under your pillow and look at it as soon as you get up. Infuse your dreams with your purpose. Let your purpose be proclaimed from the highest mountain, because it will make a difference to everybody you meet, and everybody you meet wants to activate or actualize their own purpose in life. So they are going to take their cues and their inspiration from you, especially if you're motivated and strong enough and courageous enough to be able to share it regularly. Because something happens when we share. We're not separate. We have that infinite power of consciousness vibrating like a hum within us. So on that note, I thought maybe I could just do a very short practice to help you actualize your purpose while you're there. And as you're listening, just put your feet on the ground. And just really feel into your body. Like, thank your body for being here. Like, just say, thank you, body, because that physical body of yours is going to last a long time and needs to know that she or he is really loved. So you're just going into that simple presence and allowing the body to feel deeply loved and deeply nurtured. And then let your purpose come to mind. Let your purpose arise in your mind, your heart, and just notice what it is. If you don't have a purpose yet, you can say, well, I'm not sure of my purpose yet, but I'd like to even be open to that purpose in this meditation. And so let that be a sphere of light or a diamond, or so you could create a symbol. It could even be a dragon that represents your purpose. So let that purpose rest in your heart. And then if you have a particular purpose, of course, you could visualize and feel it. I'm going to feel and sense my purpose like that pearl, like Kuan Yin's pearl. It's really beautiful. It's a particular pearl, mother and baby pearl, and I'm letting it really lodge inside my heart. So whatever your purpose is, let it infuse you. And then let that purpose start to drop down, to saturate through your being. So from your heart, let it go down to your belly, your womb. So right, if it's a sphere of light or a dragon or a pearl, it doesn't matter. You can still let that purpose infuse your body. Let it saturate your hips. Let it fill your thighs, your knees, your calves, your ankles and feet. Let it fill even your toes. I read a book called Dune, where the high priestess Bene Gesserit used to be able to focus on their little toe for long periods of time. So let your purpose saturate your little toe. Go right to the tip of, say, your left little toe and put your purpose right there and let it sparkle. So my pearl my pearl of consciousness is sparkling there. Now let it saturate every part of your toes. Let it start to move up through your body, up through your calves, your thighs, your belly, womb, your heart, chest, your arms, your hands. Let it saturate even your fingers. It's kind of like water alchemy. Mine's like this liquid light that's in every single fingertip. See if you can create it in your tiny little finger of your left hand or your right hand. Let it glow with your purpose. And then let it go, move further up into your throat, into your chin, and your lips, your nose, behind your eyes. Let it fill your brain, your crown chakra. Let it fill even the medulla at the back of your head. Let it flow down your spine, the back of your spine like a river. Let that purpose fill your whole body. And then now just notice where the strongest feeling for that purpose is. So mine's in my heart. I have a very strong passion for completing this purpose. Notice where yours is. Could be in your belly, right? Could be a deep womb feeling of like giving birth. Could be in your throat. Could be in your eyes. Could be in your head. Could be in the Ajna chakra, the third eye between your eyebrows. Could be even around your body. It could be out of your body. Wherever it is, notice what the feeling is. Is it joy that accompanies your purpose? Is it a sense of drive and initiation? Is it a wisdom? Is it a feeling of love? Just notice what the feeling is and start to amplify that. Sometimes it helps humming like Sometimes it is perfect to be in stillness and feel that purpose start to flood every cell of your body, as if trillions of cells now become trillions of purposes repeated over and over again, filling you. And then let that purpose flow up your body and in and behind your eyes, and see if you can make your purpose glow. See if you can make the purpose flow out into the room. See if you can let it flow out into the space, into the sounds, beyond your house, into the universe, into the stars and planets, and beyond. And just sit in the stillness and the silence. And when you're ready, you can just gently open your eyes, cloak at a time, as if you're literally the sun of purpose shining for the very first time, as if you're seeing everything anew. The reason that people don't find their purpose is a really simple sense of feeling incomplete. There are very few people statistically that know their purpose, and there are very few people that actually carry their purpose out to its fullness. And that simply comes from a really basic existential feeling that this physical body has and accompanies us with, and that is that I'm separate from all of you listening, and that I'm even separate from you doing this interview with me. There is a feeling in the body from birth, or when we come out, that very first initial moment, that in some way we're not complete. We look for our mother's breast, we look for companionship our whole life, we look for love. So there is a direct connection between not finding our purpose and our ability to love. If we look at most of the major religions on the planet, they are concerned with two major things. One is death and life beyond death, which I'm going to call non-local consciousness, and the ability to know through love or through connection that consciousness is a continuum, that it keeps, perpetuates. It does not cease to exist at some point or another when the body ceases its functions. That is one of the biggest research areas to do with near-death experience. What happens at the point of death? So the question of death and the fear of death strikes everybody at some point or another. And equally, the power of love, the power of us to love no matter what. It is, I think it pushes every single person on this planet. When we see destruction and chaos, our heart goes out to the mums, to the sons and daughters, to the babies, to the hospitals that are destroyed, to schools that are bombed, all of that kind of thing. Because deep down we know, and we all have that struggle with being separate. Now, when we're separate, we're incomplete. And by the pure nature of incompleteness, when we're incomplete, we don't feel full. We don't feel love in its fullness, and we don't feel purpose. There is a very, very strong, completely coherent connection between love and purpose. One doesn't follow without the other. And love is just recognizing your common connection with every single person on the planet. And that is very, very, very difficult. Oh, I remember an experience that I'll relate to why purpose can be so difficult. Some years ago, I ran a company in New Zealand, and I came into my company headquarters and I'd always meet my secretary first thing in the morning. She'd always get me a coffee or a tea. And at that time, on that particular morning, there was a man standing with a knife at her throat. And he simply said, "I'm going to kill her, get out." And all I could think at that moment was, "Take me." Oh, I'll cry little tears over this because it was such... if you're getting goosebumps feeling this, I just said, "Take me." I couldn't think of anything else to say. So he did. He shoved her away and grabbed me and held this knife right here on my throat. So, and it relates to purpose, as you're going to see, because I've got to make sure I don't cry too much from this. So I said to him, "If you're going to take my life, at least give me the chance to fulfill your destiny or purpose. You must," it's going to bring me more tears. "You must have a purpose." And he looked at me as if I'd sort of asked him a completely, unrelated question, but something he could suddenly, it must have flickered something. He said, "Listen," he said, "I've got to let you know, I am going to kill you. I'm on drugs. I couldn't care less about this world." But he said, "When I was a young man," and he might have been, in his late 40s, early 50s. He said, "When I was a young man, the only thing I wanted to do was to be a professional pianist." And he said, "I was a fantastic piano player, but," he said, "I went to my first audition and they told me that I was too tall or that there was something wrong with my technique." And he said that absolutely crushed me. I went into a completely different career. It didn't satisfy me. He said, "I knew my purpose was to be a musician." Oh, any of you who, like me, have had, I was a professional musician for 5 years. Anybody who knows that feeling, like there is something related to purpose and love and music. There is a common language of music that look, if you've been to any concert, your favorite, whatever, my favorite band is Coldplay, and I'm lucky enough to actually have a close association with them through a charity. Now, If you've been to any one particular concert, you will know the feeling when everybody chants the song. It's the same when you go to a football match. Everybody in Man United chants the Man United song. There's something in human coherence and consciousness that recognizes that we have a common bond. And it's often through things like that, sport or music or something really, really simple. Because sport is about the embodiment, the physical, and music also has a tone and a vibration that actually activates something in every human being. We can all relate to music. We don't even have to understand the language, as you can see by the popularity of K-pop songs. They seem to have touched a thread in the soul of humanity. So that gentleman said his purpose was to be a professional musician, and he hadn't lived it. And for whatever reason, he was put in my path. So I said to him, if I could fulfill that purpose now, what would you want to do? And I said, at least grant me that wish for you. And he said, well, I've always wanted to play. He said, I've never actually played in a proper, bar, a proper performance area. I said, just a moment. I said, I can call a friend of mine right now. And the guy said, you're going to call the police? I said, I'm not. You can even watch look. I said, so I pulled the phone out and I dial. I said, can I do it? He said, okay. So here, a crazy situation with this person. I dial a friend of mine, John, who ran a bar. He ran a performance bar, in Christchurch. And I said, John, I know you're there. I spoke to him. I said, I know you're there, and I know that you're not open, but can I actually come down and can you put the stage lights on and get the piano out? He said, Stephen, what are you doing? Well, Altair, what are you doing? Which was my name from those ETs, and I said, just please do it. And he could hear in the tone of my voice that this was a life and death thing. So the guy put the knife under my jacket, because I was kind of wearing a suit, and we walked down through the street to that bar. And he came in. It was all set up, had the lights on, thank God for that friend of mine. It was all set up. He went to the beautiful piano on a stage, with all the lights on. And then, of course, he had to put the knife down the moment that he sat down. And John had an emergent, because he ran a bar, he had an emergency button that he could just stand on, call the police. The police arrived within minutes. And that something, to this day, something in that experience of purpose, with love, with coherence, just, my recognition that another human being who was obviously in separation and fear, was really lost, couldn't find his purpose. Maybe, just for an instant, he had an inkling of his purpose when he was playing on the piano under the lights in a big public performance area. So maybe something good happened. And so I always think, purpose is such a deep, powerful, pivotal place for humanity to be. If, as we've said many times, if we weren't spending on the military and oil and all the other complete nonsense we spend money on, but we were spending it giving human beings their purpose back, because they've never ever been separate from it. And if we gave them the opportunity to just get with other people, like that piano player, like that guy who had the knife on me, if we just gave human beings the opportunity to sit together, like you're doing in Purpose Labs, to be with each other, to feel each other's purpose, to realize that it's a hell of a time finding your purpose. It's not easy. That you might have to go through a childhood like I did, where I was poked and prodded as if I was an epileptic. And it's always, it's always made me, I'm so sensitive to any physical touch. People have to be very careful if they prod me or poke me or do anything, because I've had that experience for an entire year, having people think something was wrong with me, whereas nothing was. So that, if you have to go through that, being poked and prodded and misunderstood in order to find your purpose, all I can say is at the end of the day, it was worth it. Because I had the grace of going through that when I was very, very young, and it led me to Zen in Japan. It led me to a beautiful family in Japan. It led me to a beautiful woman here in Sedona, Raquel, who is a most incredible astrologer, and my partner. It led me to the most incredible person, Zenka, you, who, I have to thank the world for. I would not be here speaking about purpose if it were not for you. And you have held the purpose of the soul, the purpose of and right for every human being to find their purpose as being the penultimate search. It really is. Both the search for discovery and the search for purpose go hand in hand. They're like two angel wings. They're like the power of consciousness held in a very, very recognizable way by a human being, where you can say, my purpose matters to me more than anything else, and there's somewhere in this world I can go to find out about it. There's somewhere I can find support. Look, literally, that pianist that I mentioned, the one with the knife, if he had had somebody not trying to find him a job, but trying to find him his purpose, the whole of his life would have been completely different. If somebody had recognized when he left school that what he needed more than anything else was support in his purpose, then his whole life would have changed. He actually lost everything. He told me he lost his family, he lost his kids, he lost his money, he lost his house, he lost everything. He was, it seemed, completely at a loss. But he found it, maybe, in that one simple moment of finding his purpose again. The advice I have for people who are looking for their purpose is very simple. There is an inner childlike aspect to our purpose that sits in our hearts and our souls like a little tiny seed. So I always encourage people to go back into the parts of their childhood that meant something really deep to them. Now, this could be, maybe you loved painting as a child. So I'll tell you something that happened to me. I loved painting as a child, and I was very good at it, but one of my teachers looked at some of my work when I was just a kid and said, that's complete nonsense. You'll never get anywhere painting things like that. You're not an artist. You're not an artist, right? So that particular part of my purpose didn't come to fruition until much later, when I entered an art competition in my 20s and won it, because of the type of art that I really wanted to do naturally. So if you're looking for your purpose, go back into your childhood, look at some really simple ways you used to play and have fun, when things were light and joyous, and you could actually naturally connect to that inner purpose that a child has quite freely. So, for example, I often use art to understand my purpose. I used to sit down and I'd just start to, doodle, get paints, get oils, and then look at what comes from you, from this natural, childlike purpose. Don't try to make anything, too much. Don't try to analyze it. Just simply stay in your heart and work with, say, crayons. Write down little words. As you're working with crayons or paints, if a little word comes out, so you might be doing that, and suddenly a word like turtle comes out. So just write down turtle and think, oh, I wonder how that's related to my purpose. And then something out, and then Egypt, ancient Egypt. Oh, I wonder how that's related to my purpose. And then you might do something else, and something really strange. A friend of mine said this happened to her the other day. Well, she's in her 20s, and she said, I know what you always say about purpose. And she said, I've always thought I was a creative soul, and suddenly this word accountant came out in the middle of everything. She said, I've got to talk to Altair because he'll know just what that means. And I said, look, maybe, she said, I'm thinking of starting to be an accountant to look after creative artists. I said, yeah, exactly. I said, people's purpose manifests in lots of different ways. It's like what I was speaking about, the many paths that come from one particular creation. you might find, like my dad said to me, it was actually a good piece of advice. I really wanted to be a professional musician, and Dad said, now, one thing you would need to do is go to university, study business, but sure, do it in the management of artists. But then at least you'll have a backup plan. It's such a typical, way of looking at it. He could have said, no, go straight into the music industry and, but anyway, there's lots of spontaneous ways that things will arise to support you in your purpose, especially when you touch that inner child part of yourself. That is a real piece of magic. So I'll give you just a simple practice you can do. Feel into a time when you, as a little child, really had a safe place. Like for me, it was with my grandma. My grandma used to love doing crochet or quilts. So I used to just sit on her lap and I was just as happy as. And she used to tell me all these stories, right? Now, that actually really helped my purpose, because the stories she used to tell me were about my great-great-grandmother, Irihapatitaki, who was a Maori princess and a legendary Maori in the history of New Zealand. And I never knew that I had a relationship to this Maori princess. Her whole tribe was murdered by a very cunning and rather ruthless Maori warrior named Te Rauparaha. And only her grandfather and her were left, and they escaped. And so my grandmother used to tell me these very deep explorer stories, what happened to her, how they had to go over the mountains, how they had to travel, right, how she met a missionary, how they got married, and that missionary happened to be the first missionary to Tahiti and the first missionary to start a church in Australia. So I've got all these kind of cross connection, and then I asked my grandmother, oh, well, how did that missionary become a missionary? And she said, well, when it was very early on in the days of England in about the 1700s, and he died of tuberculosis. And in the middle of the funeral, there was on the coffin lid, and they pulled the nails out of the coffin. He was alive, and he said, I've seen the Lord. So, near-death experience, right? You can see my grandmother telling me all these stories when I was relating them to, near-death experience, out of body, the chance to travel the world, exploration, adventure, all of this, and lineage, all of that. So really experiment with that inner child. So go to a place where you felt really safe as a child. And quite often people say to me, oh, I didn't really feel safe. Then choose another time. Choose a time in nature, choose a time with a best friend, choose a time in teenage years or even adult years where you actually, just a moment where you felt safe. And people often just say, oh, it's the first day when I, went to study something that I really wanted to study. I said, great, just go with that. Then feel where that part is in you, and reach out to that part, like joining hands with that inner child, and just say to that inner child, what do you want me to know? If that little boy or girl inside you could speak to you about their true inner purpose, what would they want you to know? What would they need? So my little boy said, I really wanted to know about the stars. I wanted to study the stars. And hence, Raquel and I, with this incredible opportunity to connect to the stars together, it's like a star-crossed relationship, right? You kind of link through the stars. So that power of that little child is going to speak to you and say, oh, well, actually, I really wanted to get some art and paint, or I wanted to pick up a guitar and play some music, or I wanted to write a drama play, or I wanted to start something like my 11-year-old daughter. She said, oh, I really want to start a manga studio and I want to sell them from my front yard. So there's lots of things in our childhood that spoke to us that we really were able to feel into that limitless space of consciousness. So that inner child, that little child inside you, is speaking to you all the time. And quite often she or he goes unnoticed. Quite often you're so busy with your job or your relationship or other things that you've got underway, is that you forget to pay attention to her. So I always ask people to spend time with their little child, their little boy, their little girl, or their teenage boy or girl, or even in some cases their adult man or woman that has not been seen, that has not been heard. You want to listen. And then you want to say to them, you're not alone. Actually reach out to that little part of you, or that younger part, and say, you're not alone. And then notice when you say that, when they really feel safe, because you asked me the question, and I responded with this feeling of, why do people not find their purpose? It's really simple. They don't feel safe. It's the same thing with relationships. Men often say, the only way I'm going to feel safe is if I'm free, right? They don't want to be tied down. And women say, look, I want to feel safe when I have all the resources. I need a home. I need a place of security. I'm going to bring up a family. I need to feel safe in a different way. Now, if we don't understand each other's safety, we'll never find that true divine connection that males and females, men and women, are already able to do. Whether it's a woman and a woman, a man and a man, a man and a woman, a woman and a man, it doesn't matter. But you need to feel safe. You need to feel it. Now, so it's the same with purpose. When we don't feel safe, that's why so few of us actually find our purpose. Because we simply don't feel safe. Somewhere, a father, a mother, a friend, a teacher, a work colleague has said, you're not up to it. You don't measure up. You're not enough. So that part of you, whenever it was, that part of you that doesn't feel enough has to trust that it's safe enough to be with that purpose. Because there's all sorts of ways that lack of safety comes in our society. You know, oh, you're only good enough for doing this, so I'm going to pay you, $10,000 a month for doing this, but I'm not paying you that for doing this. I'm only going to pay you $1,000 a month for doing that, or $500, or whatever it is. So quite often economies are brought in and make you feel really unsafe, because you feel, oh my goodness, if I go down this dream that I've got, nobody's going to pay me anything. In fact, they're probably going to try and take money from me. But if I go down this other route, I'm going to be able to earn all the money I want, and then I'll be able to live my purpose, which of course it doesn't happen, because you've suddenly bought into the fear, and that is that in some way you're not good enough. So that fear of safety is at the heart of why, one, people don't live their purpose, or they don't even find their purpose and they don't live it, because it's tucked away in there. And then what to do? You've got to touch that part of you, that inner child, that inner boy or girl or man or woman that is still looking to be recognized, still wants to be seen, needs to be heard, needs to be loved. And once you start to love that part of you that has always has known her purpose or his purpose, once you start to love that part, then something extraordinary happens. The miracle of purpose starts to spread her wings. Like an angel, she starts to unfurl her wings and thinks, oh, I'm actually safe. Oh, I've got goosebumps again. I'm actually safe to show my wings, because nobody's going to cut me down, say I'm terrible at what I'm doing, try to make out that I'm hopeless or not good enough, or that I'm a fraud, right? There's all of these areas of fear and that feeling unsafe that human beings are prone to right throughout their life. I've often spoken to people and found that prior to birth, the pre-womb experience, so you come down from this beautiful seed of creation, the heavens themselves, and you come into a womb where your mum's just plain frightened. She doesn't know it's the first child, or she doesn't know how to deal with it, or she's in a toxic relationship, or she's having difficulties, or your father's having difficulties and projects that on his partner, on the mum, or there's some other aspect to the relationship that is making it very toxic and difficult. So quite often, way back then, you can be absorbing these messages from your mother or your father, or your mother and mother, or your father and father, depending on what kind of relationship you're in. you're absorbing those messages, and they're all about lack or not being good enough or not feeling safe. Just even that simple feeling of being unsafe. That's why, all the money that we spend on our world, if it could be spent in terms of helping people find their purpose and helping mums help their unborn kids or prior to birth children, if mothers and fathers, or fathers and fathers and mothers could actually know that the purpose of this great universe is coming through this birth, that would change everything. Would change everything about the way we thought about life. It would also change this fundamental safety that we want to feel, and it would help everybody so much. That core wound, of the belief, the belief that says I'm not enough, or that I am less than what I deserve, that core belief, as I spoke to a scientist about one day, if you go back into that moment when that core belief arose, so you go back just prior and you seed that core belief with its opposite or the power of your purpose. Just simply, so let's say, I'll give you an example of where I helped a son and his dad. So the dad was very wealthy, and the son expected he was going to inherit a large amount of money. However, the father didn't like what the son wanted to go into consciousness, and so the father simply counted him out of the will, and the son held this deep grudge that the father had blocked his purpose. So the son came to me years later and said, look, I'm blocked, I've never been able to fulfill my purpose. I have a wound, and that wound is so deep that it's blocked me my whole life. And I said, when did that wound happen? And he said, it was when my father counted me out of his will. And I said, well, go back even further. When's the earliest time you can remember that your father actually blocked you, even in the smallest way? And he thought for a moment, he said, there was a time when I was very little, and he said it was the time when I was supposed to apply for a primary or an elementary school, and I was supposed to do these exams and achieve well, and I didn't. And my father got really mad and exploded at me that I hadn't been able to enter the school that he'd wanted because of my abilities. And then I went to still a very good school, but it wasn't the one that lived up to my father's expectations. I said, that's the moment. So I said, where's the moment before that? I said, do you have a moment where your father actually genuinely showed you some love? And he said, I can't find it, no. And this will be the common case of many of you listening. You might say, I just can't find that moment when, for example, my dad loved me. And I said, okay, so what about if you go back before that time, when your father told you that he was so displeased with you, and where is the moment that you actually felt you had a purpose? Or he said, well, actually, I really wanted to go to the school that my father had sorted out for me. So he said there was that moment. That mightn't have been my father's love, but it was a way that I wanted to. I said, great. If you go to that moment, and I said, if you simply forgive your father at that particular moment for everything that came afterwards. Oh, I can feel it too. So if you're listening and I spoke to a quantum physicist about this, and he said the moment you go back to that moment, the prior moment, you actually forgive that moment. Forgiveness is kind of just simply opening space for the unknown to happen. You're not saying, I have to forgive my father for all its sins. No, you're just simply saying, I'm going to forgive that moment. So you can kind of get out of personalizing it. Just say, oh, look, I forgive that moment. I can see it in just a slightly different way. You switch your perspective from feeling wounded about everything that happened after, just to tweak, and just see what happens. Instead of trying to desperately forgive your father for all the things, you just simply forgive that moment. And he said, he said, if I know I don't have to forgive my father, he said, I think I can forgive. I think my father genuinely wanted something good for me, and I wanted to do that too. And he said, I can actually see the goodness in that moment. I can forgive that particular moment. And I said, so now come forward from that moment. What's happening? He said, yeah, I can feel my dad, he just wanted good things for me, but I simply was a rebel. And he said, I loved being rebellious. So he said, I realize I don't have to forgive my father, I have to forgive myself. He said, because I was the one who felt I could never live up to my father's expectations. I was the one who blocked my own purpose. My own purpose was simply to be a rebel, and that's still what I'm trying to do. And I said, there you go. You don't have to forgive every person in your life. You don't have to forgive every event. All you have to do is find one event that you can just bring a little humility, a little softness, and a little forgiveness for yourself. And you don't have to shoulder all that other stuff anymore. And the quantum physicist said, he said, you know what happens is that all those synchronicities and signs and events that could have actually happened in the infinite field now suddenly start to open. And that's exactly what happened. That particular young man then went to his brother, and his brother decided that he and the brother would actually work together and start to work on some of the very things that the young boy had dreamed of. So, just simply because he told him what had happened, he said, look, I've had this grudge against my dad, and now I've gone and done this, and it feels different. I feel like I'm ready to embrace the family business, or, the family purpose. And so something happens when we just take, as Mingyur Rinpoche always said to me, he said, instead of turning right, turn left. So this is another little piece or little tip for those of you that are looking for your purpose. Let's say you really don't know your purpose. What you'll probably find is happening in your life is you have a particular routine that has been ingrained in you, it's been drilled into you, and you're doing the same thing every day. You're going to work, you're going to the same old job, you go out your door, you turn right, you go to the garage, you open the garage door, you take the car and you drive to work, right? How about tomorrow you go out your door and you turn left? And it doesn't matter that you don't get your car, but you just walk in a completely different direction. Maybe you go around the block, maybe you go to a shop you've never been to, and you buy something that you've never ever thought about before. Just think about what could happen in the universe if you do that, because suddenly the routine that you haven't realized has been actually blocking your purpose. Because in fact, there's a part of you that's saying, yeah, well, okay, at least I've got this job. There's a part of you that has not seen the infinite possibility that arises when you turn left. So that's always my advice to lots of people who don't find their purpose is go out your door tomorrow and turn left and see what happens. There was a good friend of mine who used to do this with socks. So he used to say, he said there was a time in his life when he was, on a downwards spiral, and he really didn't know how to deal with it. And another friend of his said, why don't you just change your socks? And he said, what do you mean? And he said, every morning, his friend said to him, every morning, I bet you get up and you've got your socks laid out exactly so, and you put on the next pair of socks. And my friend said, yeah, exactly, that's what I do. He said, doesn't everybody do that? He said, the other friend said, no. What about you if you, tonight, you go to your socks drawer and you mismatch them? And then tomorrow, when you'd usually go and choose just the very next pair of socks and then head off to work, why don't you take the time to decide which of the mismatched pairs you're going to wear? Now, my friend said that the idea came for him, for this massive business, which he grew and which is very famous, came from that sock. that one morning he was literally taking the time, because usually he'd rush in, pick the socks, but he had to stop and he had to choose which mismatched sock. And suddenly, as he was just reaching for the mismatched sock, his purpose, his real purpose, suddenly flooded his heart. And that was simply because he had chosen to turn left. Instead of doing the obvious, which you, in your own way, and it's a very, very realistic way that affects all of us, instead of recognizing the routines that you've got are actually hampering your individuality, your purpose, your spontaneity, and your freedom, he suddenly realized he needed to turn left. And that's a very simple help to everybody who wants to find their purpose. Mismatch your socks, turn left, and do something incredibly spontaneous and different and see what happens. The biggest struggle I had in living my purpose has always been finding the people and the resources to support that purpose. In the beginning, I always thought my purpose, which was the consciousness that we've been speaking about, and right now I'm directing a consciousness institute, so my purpose is flowering, but there were, for many years, I used to share this with people and they'd say, well, you're mad, and nobody wants to fund that, and where are you going to make a living from that, and how can what is consciousness anyway? Now, this was before people really looked deeply into the research of consciousness. I think Dan Brown has even put out a book recently called The Secret of Secrets, which is all about consciousness. In fact, there's a Netflix series about to be made on consciousness based on the book, which has just come out now. In fact, I'll tell you a really fun story about that and about the way that purpose can just show up and the way you can deal with this in terms of the way you might struggle. So like I said, people and resources were always my biggest struggle for many years, because for a while I talked to people about ETs way before ETs became even fashionable to talk about, and people would say, hey, don't speak about that, they'd say. I even went for a job and they said, hey, I hear that you speak on ETs. Can you actually not mention that around here? And then I found out much later that by talking to people very quietly, that around about 40% of everybody that was part of that staff were totally into ETs. But that was, like a warning. No, don't speak about that. That's not only is it fringe, but it's dangerous. People are going to be led to believe really strange things if you start to talk to them about that. And especially because I know it's not a belief, it's a knowing. So in terms of that struggle, people and resources. So I was always looking for, the right person and the right resource. And I never quite knew when I was going to have somebody that would, support it in that way. And I'm sure if those of you that are listening felt into this and you felt, if I had all the resources and all the people to support it, most of us are looking for a team to support us and the resources to back us, some sort of funding, some kind of salary, some kind of, lump sum payment that'll see us through to the end of our days, and we'll be able to do it. So how do you find those people and those resources? One of the things I've been speaking about to many people recently is putting together what I'll call a coherent fund, a group of funders and investors throughout the world who literally support and fund people's purpose. So those people and those funds do exist, and I'm very fortunate to know some of them, and of course I know you, and I know many of you that are listening to this will think, I know a person like that. So if you know a person like that, let us know. That's the key. You want to bring the common resources and information to one place. You want to share that resource because that resource helps coherence. So that struggle that I had with people and resources, I've slowly begun to unfold that a little bit like a lotus flower. I've learned to speak up rather than to hold back. When I'm in a group, and this is something that I've done for many years, I ask people, what is your purpose? What's your dream? I was in a financial investment group the other day, and I said, if I were your genie and you had 3 wishes, what would you wish? And everybody stopped. They went, well, that's a serious question. Now, funnily enough, I played Aladdin in the very first televised performance of Aladdin in New Zealand. So there's a little bit of a funny fact connected to this. And when I used to first do Vedic and Galactic charts in the US and Canada, people used to say, you're like a genie. So in fact, they'd give me, I think I've been given many, many lamps, many, rare paintings and so on and so forth. So if you were to ask yourself, if you were given 3 wishes, what would they be? It makes people really stop. Now, in terms of people and resources, that's what I learned. Is my greatest struggle was trying to find the connecting point to those people and to those resources. How do I touch the hearts of the people and the resources that are going to make the most difference in my life? So what I used to do was I used to go around and I used to ask this, what's your dream? If you had 3 wishes, what would they be? And then when people tell me what their purpose is and what their dream is and what their wishes would be, it helps me to understand, in terms of my triangle, you're much more interested in the research of consciousness, or you're much more interested in connecting groups and bringing about coherence, or you're more of a capital and resources person. You're much more interested in finding the funds and the sources and the money and the support that are going to allow this triangle of love to birth and create planetary civilization. So it's that kind of struggle, I guess you'd say, that gave me that gift. It made me realize if I ask the right questions to every single human being, I will be able to find out in an embodied way what happens. So I've been working with family offices for around 30 years now. And what I do is I go in for the very first time, I ask them about their heritage, their grandparents, their parents, their kids, and then I ask them the same thing. What's your dream? What's your purpose? If you had 3 wishes, what would they be? And I listen to their language. So the key for all of you, if you've got a struggle around, like I had, around finding your purpose, then listen really, really closely to the kinds of love language that people use when they speak about their purpose. And some people will use very analytical language, some people will use poetry, some people will liken it to a love relationship, some people will talk about money, some people will talk about their future self giving them direction, some people will talk about channeling guidance from ETs or an ancient Egyptian past life, whatever it is. Allow yourself to be really open and listen to that person's struggle and that person's love language, how they talk about their purpose. Because what it will do, it will awaken the embodiment of purpose in you. Time after time, you'll start to understand that just like me, just like you, I'm just like you and you're just like me. We all had a struggle around our purpose whenever it occurred. We all had a lot of mud and deep jungle paths to wade through and cesspools to smell and feel like this isn't our purpose and all the rest of it. There's all that dirty, yucky stuff that you have to work your way through because you're growing to know a different side of the universe through yourself. And that's why people's love language and the nature of the purpose and the nature of their struggle become so important. The effect I've had on people around me by living my purpose is simply a love that creates a frequency and a vibration of sharing, of coherence. A little like the gentleman I told you that held the knife against my throat, by simply loving him, and he actually said that, I've just remembered that, very important. He said, what are you doing? He said, "Are you loving me?" Which was exactly, without me consciously doing that, I think I was both scared and very, very calm. I know it's an odd way to describe it, but that's what it felt like, is that really, really deeply we're able to help people by loving them. So that would be the effect I'm hoping that I've had on people, is that they genuinely feel, like I was talking about the inner child, they genuinely feel, and like that guy with the knife, that in some way there's just a little bit more love in their life than there was before. I think that's the most beautiful thing we can do for any human being, any animal, any plant. There's some wonderful research out about plants that within around a 10 to 20 kilometer radius of your plant, that when you come within that radius of your plant, the plant you've been looking after, that home plant will pick up your frequency. Now, that is mind-blowing research. It's something that some of my research center founders have shared with me. They said it's just so mind-blowing. So that if I can have that effect on everybody, and that is that within a 10 or 20 kilometer radius, if we all knew that we were all coming to support and love and care for each other, I think I would have done my part. And I hope that is the effect that I've had on people. And certainly in some of those situations, like I've had these beautiful connections, for example, with snakes. I've had that ability to speak to snakes since I was very young. And I remember I was walking in Japan one day, and I walked through a field with a group of people, and a white snake, came across the path. And everybody got a bit scared, and for a reason I'll share. And I went up to the snake. She was a female, and I knelt down and I spoke to her. And then she stopped. She didn't continue on. She stopped. She turned. She came up right up to within, this much of my face, and just, it was so telepathic. It was so beautiful. And then she turned and went on her way. And it's happened many times. And the villagers came up to me and said to me, "What were you doing?" I said, "Well, I was speaking to the snake. She needed directions." And they said, "But there are no white snakes in this area." And they had been living in that area for 40, 50, 60 years. And they said, "We've never seen a snake. We saw there was one there with you, but that snake, there's only one part of Japan where they live, and they don't live." Now, obviously, it could have been an albino, or it could have been whatever that snake was. But it was a very pure frequency. And I've had that many times with snakes, with dolphins. I was down at a beach with some friends after I called one of the starcraft in those amazing experiences in New Zealand in the early 1990s, where we actually called a starcraft that was witnessed, that was shared on television, on the radio. There were lots of newspaper reports. The US flew aircraft out to do research. They closed off the village for a week. It was just fun. It was a big event. And after that event, I went to a beach with friends, and they said, "Oh, so you can call starcraft." And I said, "I've never said I called anything. I said we have a natural coherence, or a natural ability to communicate with anything. So we don't call them, but we naturally feel them, and they're always part of our field. They're not separate from it." And they made a joke and said, "Call some dolphins. Why don't you call the dolphins?" So I sat down on the beach, and I still remember I felt that same thing in my body, an ocean, literally, with dolphins. And right at that moment, my friends started yelling, and a pod of around 300 dolphins swam across the horizon. 3 of the dolphins split off from that group, swam directly into where I was. It was a wild ocean beach. I ripped off my clothes. I said, "My friends, are you coming in?" They said, "It's too dangerous." I said, No, we'll be looked after." None of them were game enough to try, but I'm a good swimmer, so I like being in the surf. So I dived in. Those dolphins swam around me for 20 minutes and communicated the same way as the plants of 20 kilometers. That's what I think actually realistically was happening. I just simply extended my field to the starcraft, or to the dolphins, or to the snake, or to the hummingbirds, and then they pick up the field and they naturally say, yeah, we're here, we feel that field too. How come you humans don't get how big your field is and how much influence you have and how important that purpose is? Because that purpose is related to the field that you share. So when you're truly in congruence with your field or your purpose, when you vibrate, your field expands. And when the field expands, beings are going to pick up on your field, because it's a field of coherence and it's a field of purpose. You know, the cultivation of pure love is a real art and a gift. So I'll share something that I've worked again with a number of people around the world on this cultivation of love and the expansion of your field. So I'll give you a purpose-driven example. So think of a sentence connected with your purpose. So it could be like, I'm the light of God, or it could be my purpose is fill with the universe, or it could be something as simple as, well, I need 200,000 for my next project, right? It can be as basic or as wide or as religious or non-religious or whatever you want. Find that, write it down, and so that you're very aware of what the words are. So I'm going to say something simple, like I'm the light of the world is my purpose, right? Or I'm the love of the world, or I'm the love and consciousness of the world. Something very simple. Now, go into your, so this is all to do with what the power of Shakti and Chi and Prana. So go into your root chakra, right? And I want you to sit in that root chakra and then feel the power of whatever that sentence is. So I'm going to use I'm the light of the world. So you're going to say that sentence, whatever your purpose is, you know, and if you don't know your purpose, then just jump on the nearest, most powerful sentence you can find and just say it in your root chakra several times, like I'm the light of the world. And then you whisper it, and then you feel it. Now, as you feel it, imagine, I'm going to call it the Holy Spirit, but you can call it what you want. Imagine the universal force of the Divine Mother coming behind you like a massive field of love and flowing through that central power that's right there in your root chakra, and then flows all the way out in front of you as far as you can imagine and curves out in a torus field. So you create a torus field around you, like a horizontal torus field, and it comes all the way back, and then it grounds itself or herself in that root center. So you're feeling the power of I'm the light of the world, or I'm the love of the world, or I'm the power of this manifestation of the 200,000 I need for the funds, or whatever it happens to be, or I've got perfect health, or I am living my purpose. Anything that really grounds that. Then inhale, so inhale that Shakti up and into your second chakra. So now you're vibrating with that purpose, so it's getting stronger, and I'm sure you can feel it as you're feeling into that purpose and it's flowing up into your second chakra. And now again you recite the same words, like for example, I am living my purpose, and you're reciting it, you're saying it, you're grounding it. It's like a mantra in your second chakra. And you're breathing it and you're whispering it, I'm the living light of purpose. And then you're feeling it. And then feel as if again, the light of God, the Holy Spirit, the Divine Mother sends this massive wind of power and energy and light through you from the back. And it flows through you and then out in front creates a torus field out in front of your purpose. So you're actually really, really dynamically increasing your field. It might flow out as far as you can imagine, back around, then grounds itself in the second chakra. And then you do the same thing. You do the same thing in the navel center. So you're breathing the energy up to the navel center. You're grounding your purpose with that affirmation. You're sending the light of the Holy Spirit of the Divine Mother through the navel center, out in front as far as you can imagine, all the way around in the torus field, and then anchoring herself in your navel center. Then you inhale again up your heart. Again, you're grounding the power of that affirmation and the mantra, so you can do this all in your own time, that you're really living the power of your true purpose. And you're feeling the winds of spirit flowing from behind you, through you, penetrating that heart chakra, flowing all the way out with your purpose to touch infinite souls, to fill the earth, to fill the stars, and flowing back into the heart. And then you breathe up into the throat chakra. And then you fill yourself with that mantra, that purpose. I'm the living light of truth of all purpose. And you feel the light of the mother and the power and the wind of the spirit flowing through your throat chakra and out as far as you can imagine. It touches all the people you need to touch, all the resources you need to touch, flows back into your throat chakra. Then you breathe it up and into your third eye. It lights up your Ajna chakra. You anchor your purpose there with that same incredible power of purpose. So now my whole field is lit up like a party. It's lit up like as if all the stars in the sky are lit up with this I'm the power of purpose, and it's lighting up the Ajna chakra. The winds of spirit come from way behind, power right through the third eye, through the medallion, through the front of the third eye, out and into every part of the future. It's almost as if you're bringing all the pasts of your purpose and into the future of the purpose. You're linking it all together in that torus field. It flows out to left and right simultaneously, back into your Ajna chakra. And then finally you inhale it up into your crown chakra, and you literally vibrate that crown chakra with that incredible light of purpose. And you affirm it again, I'm the light of purpose, I'm the light of purpose. And you ground it so deeply in your crown chakra. Then you bring the light of spirit through the crown chakra. You flow that light, that torus field, out into the infinite field. You feel all the connections, all the synchronicities and signs that you ever need in the next 24 hours actually being drawn into your field. You flow back into the crown chakra. You take a deep breath in. You let all of this anchor down, through the crown chakra, through the Ajna chakra, through the throat, the heart, the navel, the sacral, right down to the root. Then you breathe it up again, connecting all those purposes that are anchored in each of your chakras like a string of pearls. So you're breathing, you're drawing it all the way up to the crown, then you exhale. And you can do that as many times as you need. So you're literally this vibrating, pure connection, this necklace of pearls of purpose flowing in your central sushumna, in your central spinal column. So all that Shakti and all that Chi and all that prana is actually igniting and reigniting as you keep threading each one of those chakras with that light, with that Shakti. Every single time you've anchored that purpose in each one of your chakras, it's lighting up. So then you can slowly open your eyes and just be aware when you open your eyes how massive your field feels and how all those interactions and connections and signs and synchronicities and people and resources that you need to activate your purpose, whether you know your purpose or not, that they are literally lit. Everybody. And then look for the light in people, animals, plants, stars, newspaper items, times when you doodle and a word sings out to you, a song, a feeling. Just look for all of those and start to keep a purpose journal where you've got all of those things written down. There's something that happens when you write them all down. You literally start to anchor that again and again and again. You anchor that Kodadhamma, the power of words. So that energy, that light, that love is awake. And that light and love and energy is your purpose. And you are simply manifesting it in lots of different forms through all the different perspectives we hold. You're literally like a neuron in the brain of God or in the heart of God. You are literally a heartbeat, and you're a pulse and a spark in the universe, and you have your own purpose to share. So go and do that, and go and be that. So if the majority of people were living their purpose, I would feel everyone a little like a diamond. As if when I came into your presence, I suddenly realized and resonated with exactly why you were here. I would feel like complete. I would feel safe. The world would feel like a place where everybody was holding everybody else in a safe, complete, and fulfilling diamond, where all the little facets of that diamond were all sparkling exactly as they were supposed to be, that somehow or another God had decided to polish that diamond and polished particularly your little sparkle or your big sparkle and made it shine. And you would feel as if it's like that coherence. The research shows that there's a certain number of people we need to all be feeling the same resonance, to all be resonating, whatever that is, whether you're singing the same note or all resonating with your purpose. We only need a certain number. There's been many numbers shared, like the 144,000 or whatever number it is. I would say, I love that passage of Christ that always said, where two or three are gathered in my name, there I'll be. Oh, that speaks to purpose. You only need to find two or three. And then, like the Dalai Lama told me, when I first met the Dalai Lama, I was a very young man and I had sponsored his trip or his tour to New Zealand. And as a result of that, I was given a private audience with him. And he sat down and he said to me, so tell me, what would you like to know? And I said, I just simply want to know how to embody Kuan Yin or Avalokiteshvara. And he said, oh, that's simple. He said, there's 4 things you need to do. He said, first of all, study everything you can about that. Second of all, embody that teaching. Third of all, become. You need to become Kuan Yin because you can. And then the fourth one is teach it. Teach 10 to teach 10 to teach 10 to teach 10. So it's the same with purpose. Because you're listening to this, you are already poised to know your purpose, to be that 5 or 10% and actually turn that 5 or 10% that know and follow their purpose into 20% and 50% and then eventually 100%. Because all that it requires is for you to do exactly what the Dalai Lama said. First of all, study purpose. Go and find an institute or a hollow purpose lab or the purpose labs. Go and find somebody who's dedicated to bringing purpose into the world and study it with them. Then second of all, embody. Whatever you find out, embody it. Embody the language, embody the feelings, embody the smells, embody the sense of what it's like to be somebody who at least is on the path of their purpose, even if you don't know it. Just simply embrace the possibility. And then, once you embody it, then become it. You'll find, once you embrace the possibility that you can embody your purpose, you only have to seek the possibility. You don't have to have all the answers. You just have to say, it's possible for me. It's possible because there are people out there for whom purpose matters. And then, once you've got that, then go and share that. Go and share that. Find just 2 or 3 people who share a common purpose, or who even share the importance of purpose. That's all you need. That alone would change our world. Because if every person like you, like me, goes and finds 2 others, it's a very short exponential equation that one finds another, and those 2 find 2 more, and those 4 find, and so on and so forth. That's all you need to do. Just keep that in mind. Let people know that purpose matters, and that purpose is actually the container we need on this planet to find our answers to consciousness, to find our answers to how we can all live together in harmony, and to find the answers to how we're going to bring all our resources together to find love and to grow this planetary civilization to its absolute fullest, most wonderful expression of itself. Because ultimately, we are not separate. Whenever a war happens, we're that war. We feel with it. Whenever something wonderful happens and a birth happens in our family, we're that birth. Whenever something happens and somebody finds their purpose, we're that purpose. We're not ever separate from anybody's purpose. So if you can help somebody else find their purpose, then that in turn is already amplifying yours. the field of purpose then starts to find